Welcome to a Champion's Journey podcast. I'm Matt Davidson. From an early age, I've had the privilege of learning from world champions and world-class performers, and I've always been fascinated by what drives them to the pinnacle of achievement. In this podcast, I'll interview high performers to learn more about the habits, rituals, tactics, and strategies which have aided them throughout the course of their journeys so that we can take those lessons and apply them to ours. The mission of a Champion's Journey podcast is to interview not only those who have stood on the top podium in arenas of high-level competition, but to learn from those who have conquered life's greatest challenges and have dared to live life on their own terms. My next guests are nothing short of awe-inspiring. I was finally able to sit down and have a conversation with the incredibly talented freestyle skydiving team, XP Ascend. Using the term talented, however, would actually be somewhat misleading because Jason Brigmon and Jake Carlton, the dynamic duo who have turned XP Ascend into the international powerhouse it has become, have worked diligently to forge their vision of excellence into a reality. Not only have they dominated the U.S. national and world stages of competition over the last 2 years, but through laser-focused dedication and a leaning towards innovation, they continue to break the barriers of what was previously thought possible in the world of multi-axis precision body flight. Jake and Jason's meteoric rise to success has done nothing to diminish their humility or approachability and has only enhanced their energetic and effervescent passion to raise the bar of body flight and to help skydivers of all ability levels improve their skills and collectively ascend to higher summits. Please welcome Jason Brigmon and Jake Carlton. All right, guys, welcome. I appreciate you being here. This has been a long time coming. Finally able to sit down and have a conversation with the incredibly talented freestyle skydiving team, XP Ascend. Using the term talented, however, would actually be a bit of a misnomer because Jason Brigmon and Jake Carlton, the dynamic duo who've turned XP Ascend into the international powerhouse it has become, have worked extremely hard to turn their vision into a reality. And Jason, I'd like to start off by asking you, what inspired the original vision for XP Ascend?
The original, I don't know. I guess it was a process as far as how it built up to what it was. It started out with Jake and I making two-way jumps, really just enjoying two ways, the dynamic flying in the sky. And at the time I was shooting video for a different freestyle team, and watching that after a few years, I was like, I really wanted to give the performer a shot. And yeah, I guess as we made the jumps, I'd presented the idea to Jake, and Jake was interested. At the time, we were flying together in the tunnel as well. And yeah, he was working hard. It was like, oh, let's give it a shot. And yeah, I guess it kind of rolled into that way.
Nice, yeah, and your story is really interesting too. We'll get to that, but you're the camera flyer for the team, and how would you describe your role?
The camera's pretty interesting in freestyle free fly in relation to kind of other disciplines because it's very integrated into what happens in the sky. Whereas other disciplines, with the exception of maybe like an MFS where there's a lot of extreme speed changes, it's a lot of, I'm going to kind of park here and then the team is going to perform and I got to make sure that the team's inside the frame. Whereas what we do is very specific to the routine where both roles kind of have a 50% importance they have to play. So obviously what you see is a lot of Jason's tricks, the skill on that side, but the visuals themselves, the way that you see them are very much done on the camera end and how I need to be in the right place at the right time with the exact right level at the right speed. And those kind of all put together in conjunction with how he flies his lines is how we kind of create the visuals. So it's unique, but it's a lot of fun on that side. It's kind of the flying that I prefer. Same thing kind of in the tunnel. I like the lines more, some of those things. So it's probably something that if I was going to compete, this is the only way I would compete. And it kind of worked out really well because Jason's style is very, very clean. It's aesthetic. It's a lot of things that when people look at it, like I really like that a lot. Whereas I'm not that kind of flyer. So it worked out really nicely whenever he was looking to be the performer because we kind of met both roles, looking to be that kind of a flyer.
So would you say that you're just not as precise, or your style of flying is different?
Yeah, it's just different. With freestyle, you kind of have to have the trick side and you have to have kind of like the line side, whereas like flying the lines are more kind of on the camera side. Now we do it together as a team. Like we are very specific to how we fly the lines, but I like to be able to make sure that the lines are in the exact right place at the right time so the visuals make sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. You started out on the other side of the camera lens as well, right? Do you think that helped you become a better flyer? And if so, why?
Yeah, I definitely think it played a pretty major role in it. I think you start to see how important it is that the performer flies with the camera, because if you're not in sync and next thing the performer's, kind of getting away or traveling and they get in their own world and then we're trying to work together, what Jake was talking about, it's important, even though we're both flying lines, it's making sure that the lines we're flying are actually together and flowing together. If we start to get out of sync, then there's this we call it rubber banding, where things start moving, but we're kind of going at opposites and things are stretching and we're building up momentum and speeds at times that we don't necessarily need to. But with the shooting the camera, I think I've seen how important it was. And I think being able to work that in with flying the lines and the tricks so that we stay connected more throughout the whole jump and not just kind of occasionally.
Did you find that in the beginning of that process together, did you find that happened a lot more often? And then about how long did it take you until those lines started converging and you guys really started flying together as a team?
That's actually a pretty good question. I don't think it was actually specific as a team in time frame as much as it is as a season in time frame. So as we start the season, a lot of those things are out of sync when we're starting to create what we're trying to create. As the season goes on and we start to figure out what lines make more sense in what places and what part of the skydive, which is also a pretty big thing of how the speeds change throughout the skydive itself, those things start to re-sync up a little bit. But there's a little bit of a lack of cohesion at the beginning of the year. And then as we build, we kind of build that cohesion as it goes. Now, if we just go fly two ways, and at this point we've flown a lot of two ways, I will say we're pretty good at keeping the lines together on just no plan two ways because we've seen each other fly so much. We can see each other's trajectories well, know when we need to stop, we need to keep going, we need to turn, we need to flow, we need to dive. And so as far as that goes, it's probably easier now than it was in the past. But the beginning of the season is always a bit painful, especially putting a routine together. There's a slight depression in the first couple months where we're just feeling lost.
Yeah, it's very challenging on the free routine because even as we're trying stuff, it's hard to go up and then do it again and then do it again. So it's supposed to be the same skydive that we're repeating, but we probably fly like 30, 40 variations just in relation to the speeds. It was like if all of a sudden someone was in the tunnel and they're like, okay, 80%, all right, 85%, all right, 95%, and then we're both flying kind of different. So it's like it slowly becomes one skydive as we're flying a lot of that.
Nice. So you'll have to forgive my ignorance because, I'm in a completely different discipline, but what, as far as doing the actual moves, is it something that you talk about beforehand, or do you ever just get in the tunnel and say, hey, let's just play, and if something comes out of this, then we'll be like, hey, we're going to use that. That was awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's we do that in the sky. So the beginning of the year for us is probably the first 20-ish skydives we do free routine sidewise outside of the compulsories themselves are two ways with pretty much no plan at all. As we fly, he's putting pieces in places where he feels like they make sense based on the trajectories, and I'm kind of flying off of that. So if I feel like he loses range, I might do something. If I feel like if he has range, I might throw something so that the camera does something interesting. And we kind of do this throughout a few skydives where we start to pick out pieces that we thought looked interesting or were cool or the way that they lined up. And where that becomes really challenging is once we pick this move that we really like, it's like, okay, this looks good. We'll write it down, throw it on the board, and we'll start to shuffle them around. But then we got to go find where that move was in the jump. Because if you throw it in the first 10 seconds, it might be a totally different speed than if we flew it in the later 30 seconds. Or if we flew it after something that was already fast, then it's like, okay, this kind of flies at this speed and we're trying to put it into this place where it's at a much slower pace or faster pace. And that piece by itself becomes very challenging. And it's a little bit of kind of putting a square peg in a round hole very often. We have to then move it to make sure that the square peg does in fact fit in the square hole somewhere else in the routine. And sometimes it just doesn't fit at all. It's like, that's just not a good place, or it's not a good move for this routine. We'll put it on the back burner. Maybe it makes sense for next year.
Yeah. Wow, those are a lot of things there that I haven't considered before. A lot of different variables that I really haven't considered. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, we do jumps where 100% no plan. And then we'll also bring in concepts of we're going to try to control this speed, or maybe I'm only going to move in certain ways. And then he has a general idea of how I plan to move, and then he can play with different visuals. Like, he's the one seeing the final product on every jump, like he sees exactly what we're being judged on. So a lot of ideas and thoughts actually come from Jake because of just what he sees. He's like, I think it would make more sense if you did this. This just doesn't seem like this kind of flows right, because I'm thinking maybe on the specific move, but he sees the actual product, which puts him in a unique, puts a little more extra pressure on him, I guess. He has to come up with a lot of the ideas.
I don't know if I necessarily have pressure there, because oftentimes I'll just throw something out that doesn't seem possible and somehow Jason's able to fly it. So it's actually pretty easy. I just come up with things that are out, like don't make any sense at all, and somehow Jason's able to still fly them. So really, I think more it's I'm coming up with thoughts that shouldn't be possible, and then Jason makes it possible, and then the end product looks ridiculous because of that. So it's actually quite an easy job. I think he has the tougher one of the two.
Well, that's really cool. But I'll bet it's a relationship, and obviously you guys, it's 50-50. You can't have one without the other in this event, specifically. But I would imagine it's like a relationship, just like any other, like a marriage, where there's a like a honeymoon phase in the beginning. And then, you guys, once the honeymoon phase wears off, then, you guys might have some friction points. Do you guys have any of that, or do you really, gel together?
I can't really think of any friction. I think we were pretty quick to just express, what we're thinking or what we're feeling. It's like, hey, this is good. Hey, this isn't good. This is challenging for me. And, we're just quick to, I think to talk it out. And I think that probably it never really builds to anything more than, just a quick little conversation here and there. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's been pretty consistent. I think we're both hungry to win and do well, and to see just how much we can achieve. And so we know we're on the same team and we both have the same goals. So we just keep working, and then it's like, okay, cool. I'm trying to do this. And then whenever one of us, no matter which one's doing what, it's like, okay, cool, they're doing that. I can be working on this. So
that's what I love about professional teams, that you don't have, many of those big friction points. If you do, usually, if you're already a part of that team, then the dynamic is, how to communicate to get through those issues quickly without them being too much of a problem. So it's, it's cool whenever you have any collective vision. I think it's cool for everybody to keep their sights on that and do whatever it takes to get to that point. Jake, how did you become interested in skydiving, and what are some key moments in your skydiving career that led you to XPSN?
That's actually a really good question. So I actually got into skydiving when I was in the Army. I was in the Q course, and at the time it was free fall for all in the Q course. So my big thing was, this is probably my only shot to go to MFF. I'm not going to fail it. So I actually had about $3,000 set aside that I was going to put into my truck, where I was going to do some work on my truck. And somebody in the Q course was actually a skydiver and told me, he's like, you can actually just go get a license. It costs about $3,000, and you can just go down and do it. I was like, well, I don't really want to do the tandem thing. He's like, no, you can just go get a license. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, just sign up for a first jump course, and you just do your jumps. You can pay ahead, yada yada. It's like, okay, cool. And I took that $3,000. Signed up the next day for the ground school on Friday evening, and got my license that way. I didn't really know how to show up to a school in the Army unprepared, especially knowledge-wise. I never wanted to be that guy that showed up where I was like, kind of teach me how to do it. I always wanted to have a pretty good base because I didn't want to fail schools. So I got in that way. It didn't take very long to realize kind of how, I like to call it, like tall the mountain of mastery is, where you really can't see the top. You don't know where the end of the sport is yet, because it's kind of young in the things that we're doing. So that by itself was very compelling to me. And that kind of created a passion in me for the sport, and actually ended up somewhat hurting my Army career, because I got so passionate in one thing and stopped focusing on the other pieces I needed to be doing. Probably wasn't positive, but that's how I kind of got into it. And from there, we had Jason on another freestyle team at the drop zone training, and watching that, I was like, that's the kind of flying I want to do. And we got in the tunnel, we started flying. We were talking about like where do we kind of want to go with the flying, and I was like, I want to fly dynamically, just in general. whether it be in the tunnel, whether it be in the sky. I like this concept of moving. I'm not super interested in the static stuff, really want to be able to move well. And we kind of went down a new path, at least in the US seemed to be a new path. At the time, it was a very specific, structured kind of progression path of kind of belly, back, head up, head down. And then you might get in a little bit dynamic, whereas Jason's like, I want to try something. And we went down this kind of slow speed dynamic route, which is now very common at XP. But at the time, it was a little like people were looking at us like we were kind of crazy. And it worked out pretty good. And it kind of led into this concept of what freestyle is. I always like kind of competing in the things that I do in general. And here was a great way to compete in a dynamic way in the sky. So that's kind of where it all kind of directed towards.
That's a really cool story, and I really like your comparison, your mountain of mastery. I haven't heard that phrase before, and I think that's really cool. I'm going to make a mental note of that. How long were you in the Army?
I ended up being in the Army for 4 years. 4
years, and so you left the Army to become a full-time skydiving competitor?
Yeah, so I actually ended up leaving the Army because I injured myself in skydiving, and I had to leave the Army due to that injury. I broke my back in skydiving, and that pushed me out of the Army, which then pushed me into skydiving, which turned out to be probably the best thing that happened at the time. Didn't seem like it, but turns out to be one of our buddies, Max Markov, always calls it the best swoop of my life.
Was it a difficult transition for you to make at the time? Because, when you're in the Army, you have a certain level of security, and then, coming out and making that transition, I'm sure that had to have been a big step for you.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm very fortunate at the time when I was in the Army, my wife was in school. And so I was kind of supporting us through that time frame. But the timing kind of worked out from the time where I left. She was starting to work at that point. So we kind of switched roles for a short time. And I was very fortunate to have that ability. And now we're kind of, now that everything's kind of worked out, like it makes more sense to be able to do both without any issues. But early on, I don't know if I could have done it without her.
And I didn't know about your back injury. How long did it take you to recover from that? And what was your psychological process like? Because I know when I was down for a while with my total hip replacement, that kind of wreaked havoc on me for a couple of years, and it was very tough psychologically to recover from that. What was your experience like?
It actually wasn't too bad. My wife was a skydiver at the time as well, and I broke my back in the end of January, and the first week of February she broke her collarbone.
Oh, man.
So I ended up taking care of her with a broken back. So it was one of those things where it's like you can feel sorry for yourself for about a week, and then you have to actually get on your feet and start doing things. So it wasn't too bad. I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate with how the injury took place, how the recovery went. I think I was in the tunnel with Jason for the first time in May, and I broke my back in January, and I made my first jump in June. Okay. And this all happened right during the COVID timeframe, so I really didn't miss out on much because nobody was jumping anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Jason, how did you get your start in skydiving, and what motivated you to focus on competition?
I was racing motorcycles, like road racing originally, and some of the guys that sponsored me in East Tennessee had invited me out to a boogie, and I had no idea what a boogie was, and I just went and hung out with them. I did a tandem, and I got to watching all the fun jumpers, and I was like, oh man, this looks like a lot of fun. How do I go about doing this? And they pretty much showed me the path, and a few weeks later I was taking the first jump course. I sold my race bike because at the time I was going back to school, and whenever I sold the race bike, I bought my first rig. So yeah, at jump 19 I was jumping my own rig, and yeah, just kind of full in, and it was pretty much just a fun jumper for the first, I guess, four years or so. And at the time I had moved over to Raleigh. I was going to NC State, and I'd found my way down to the tunnel, and XP has their membership program, and that they still do. And it's a great opportunity. I don't know many places that still offer something like that, but it was a way to consistently be in the wind tunnel. And as I was flying each week, it just, you kept getting a little bit better, and then opportunity presented itself. I never really thought I would compete in skydiving, coming from just competitive my whole life. I think skydiving was a little bit more of that escape. I had a corporate job shortly after finishing up school, and that was kind of my getaway. And then somehow I kind of found my way onto a team, and competed. Started in 2017 competing in freestyle. That was the first. I did a few tunnel competitions, but as far as skydiving, that's the only thing I've competed in was freestyle.
And you said you were competing in road bike racing at the time?
Yeah, I was.
And that was like dirt bike, like motorcycles, or
Yeah, like your CBR 600,
Okay.
1000. I raced 600s and thousands, so going up to VIR, Road Atlanta, places like that. So it was like, the road racing, so the street bikes.
how long did you do that?
I mean, it was just club racing, so just on an amateur level. But I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years I did it. Really enjoyed it, actually. I kind of miss it. That there's a whole different style of competing. You actually were head-to-head versus skydiving's just pretty much 100% offense. There's really no defense. So, just a little bit more of that head-to-head. So I do miss that side of it, but at the same time, it's, a little bit more dangerous, I guess.
Were there, is there anything that is applicable to skydiving that you learned about when you were racing motorcycles?
I think the dynamic flying, I related the street bikes to the dynamic flying a little bit of just the turns and the feeling of the force, the diving. And then, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of that sight picture there of the moving, maybe in a more of a 3D manner, or up and down versus street bikes just kind of on the road. But I don't know, I guess I related to it a little bit that way. Maybe
the flowiness of it.
Yeah, the flowiness for sure. I think that's why because in the beginning, it's like a typical, most everyone, it's like, oh, I want to learn head down. That was kind of like the ultimate. And as I was doing it, and then I started understanding, carving and layouts and all that stuff, I was like, oh man, this is what I want to do. And I think that's what kept me in the tunnel even longer, which kept me long enough to where, the opportunity to compete came in.
Do you find that with that flowiness of the bike racing led to your understanding, maybe a more intuitive body awareness, or just awareness of your body in space as to, the timing of coming out of certain moves and that type of thing?
Yeah, I definitely could see that. Your ability pretty much to do things in a smooth manner, trying to, like Jake said, with the flow versus like zigzag, feeling. So everything has to, kind of, it's got to flow. I guess that's the best way really to put it.
Yeah. And did you pick up anything psychologically as far as when it comes to competition and your mindset that you brought from that discipline to this one?
I don't think so. Maybe at the time, probably just being it was just a different style of competition. I felt whenever you're like the racing, I've learned so much in the last couple of years. I feel like the longer I compete every year, like this year, I've learned more than any other year that I learned prior. And it's just like the more that you start to learn, the more it's like, oh my gosh, everyone, like it continues to get more and more. So I've learned a lot about just how to handle competition, how to do things. So, and maybe my strategy probably continues to evolve as well, just as things go. But I don't know that the two necessarily, I brought anything from it.
Were the round one jitters, are they akin to what it was like being on a bike, being at that starting line?
Oh man, the starting line is that's probably one of the coolest things about the racing is whenever you line up and there's 20 guys and you're waiting for the flag to drop. That was a whole different feeling than, on the way to altitude, sitting on the plane. 'Cause you're thinking also about the other 20 guys versus it's whenever you're on the way up, it's more of a like, cool, it's on us and what we've done to prepare at that point. And that's something for sure that I've learned is the level of preparedness controls that confidence. That was a big thing. Our first nationals, we competed. We'd only been training for like a month and a half. We had a very short amount of time to prepare, and we showed up not really prepared, not to the level that we wanted to be. And yeah, for sure, like there was a whole different level of jitters than probably, whenever we competed last year at the championship, but we also had more time to prepare and we did a way better job of preparing. So I think whenever we showed up, it was like, cool, like we're prepared.
Yeah, I like how you put that. Your preparation is, it has everything to do with your level of confidence when you go into competition. I remember years where we've gone in, with 1,200 jumps and just, and just had that supreme, feel. You're just like, there's no way we're going to mess this up. And that's an incredible feeling to have. You guys are coming off some very big competition victories. the World Cup in Voss, Norway this past August, and more recently the U.S. Nationals at Skydive Paraclete XP. Voss was such an incredible experience. As you guys are well aware, one of the really cool services Skydive Voss provides are the in-hops. For me, getting to make an in-hop after the meet was over was one of the highlights of my skydiving career. And from what I saw and heard from you both was that the in-hop you guys made several days earlier was at an even more stunning location. And so our listeners get a sense of what it was like to be there. What are your perspectives and feelings of that incredible experience?
It was unreal. It was super cool. Anyone that I've spoken to since then, when I talk about that jump, has always asked, did you guys do the waterfall? It's like, yes. So it's like this like iconic in-hop that Voss does. We were asked at kind of the beginning of the day by the manager, Tom. He was like, kind of showed us a video. He's like, do you guys want to do this? And we're kind of looking at each other with this concept of like trying to like give each other permission to, because this is prior to the competition. We're both like,
Right.
like I kind of want to do it, but if you don't, I get it, you know. And we're both like, I want to do it. We're like, sweet, let's go do it. And it was one of those things we were kind of asking. It's like, I've never done anything like this before. Like, how does this kind of shake out? They're like, on the first one, just give yourself a little bit of space from the terrain, because, you know, you want the next one to be like, I want to be closer. And I kind of started that way. And then inside of like 2 turns, I'm like, I'm on the terrain. I'm like, okay, this was probably a poor decision, but this is amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, any opportunity after that we had to go do it, even though they weren't all fruitful just due to weather and things like that, like we were taking it. That was definitely one of those things that any opportunity I get to do, I'm going to go do from here on out.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I remember having a conversation with you about it after it happened, and I was just, all excited about it to just kind of, really get my juices flowing again for everything skydiving. And, man, I had a similar experience, but I think I was a little more cautious than you were. I was following some guys in. I was staying, kind of wide at first, and then they were taking a really tight line. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to get a little closer. And I was like, you know what? I don't know too much about how my wing is going to respond in certain, different barometric conditions or, whatever you have, as far as updrafts and that kind of thing. I just didn't know that much about it because it was my first one. So I kind of gave it, a little more breath, but it was just, man, as soon as I got out of the aircraft, I'm just looking around, being over this fjord and all of this gorgeous scenery, just going, wow.
Yeah. Even just the flight in, granted a couple of times with the clouds, but even like once we got under the cloud layer, just being full flight, even if your brakes were slow, just looking at everything, the way to altitude every time, just Voss was awesome. It was just distracting almost from the comp, because you could just look out and be like, oh, that's cool. Oh, yeah. And just look over here and it's like, oh yeah, this is round 5.
Yeah. I had to do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. That was definitely one of those places where nothing disappointed. Nothing about that drop zone I had a single complaint about. The visuals were fantastic. The people were fantastic. The facilities were fantastic. It was a great experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was wanted to talk about that a little more. Congratulations again on your gold medal victory in Voss. You guys are on fire right now. Your jumps are truly awe-inspiring to watch, and it gives spectators a true sense of art and dynamic motion. Can you describe the freestyle skydiving discipline and what makes it so unique and challenging?
I mean, I always use the phrase dynamic. It's very overused. I wish I had a better synonym for it, but we have dynamic in the tunnel. People like to fly dynamically in the tunnel. It's kind of a niche, or I guess a hip thing would be a better phrase. But people don't realize that you can do it in the sky. And that's exactly what freestyle is. It's just this way of flying through all possible orientations, to include your side, head up, head down, belly back, all of your angles, layouts, being completely flat, flying through the side, flying through carves, just every possible dimension of flying in a competition format. That also allows a level of creativity and a level of objectivity, which people don't really give the discipline enough credit for, but there is a level of objectivity in it as well, especially in the compulsory rounds and very specific maneuvers that you have to make sure that you are accomplishing every time you fly it. And we're looking to perfect those moves, and having the ability to rep things that many times to try to get them legitimately perfect is it's a fun path to go down. And then on the other side, you have the creativity of the free routine where you get to really start to play with new concepts. And I think it allows innovation in the sport. One of the things we did in 2022 is Jason flew this like head down side fly angle move in the routine. And as far as I knew, nobody had flown that in the sky prior to that. So it was a brand new kind of move that had never been done. It's innovation. You know, a lot of the way that we flew our visuals this year, the idea was to innovate how we fly eagles and how we move to create visuals. And a lot of the eagles weren't necessarily conventional where you would think of one person going up, the other going down. It's like oftentimes we were both going down or we were both going up, but one just a little less down and the other one just a little less up, whatever it might be, right? But this whole concept of being able to try new things, create new things, and then push them out, create the norm with those things, and then do it again the following year is it's a little addicting. It's hard to step away from something like that.
How much freedom do you have in changing? You were saying like you improved or you were trying different things with the Eagle. How much room do you have for that? Because when you're taking it into the context of the judging criteria.
Yeah, I mean, you have 45 seconds to your free routine is free to do whatever you want. You know, that's obviously you don't want to go out and just do one thing. You want to show that you're checking a lot of boxes as far as the head up, the head down, the side flying, just things that are moving, things that are staying in motion, your coordination with the camera. You're open to do whatever you want. And I think that's the part that some people love and some people hate. You know, some people, you know, they like that, you know, it's either, you know, a G or whatever, you know, like a formation side of things. They're looking for that and they like that. Cool. This is the draw. But whenever the boundaries are open a little bit and the creativity it's great, but at the same time, it can be frustrating because you could do 10,000 jumps and not have a routine. You know, you can keep chasing the creativity and never really achieve anything because you're like, you know, you may get bored with it or you're like, this, and you keep chasing complexity. And so there comes a certain point in the year where we're like, okay, we have to have this part, like we have to have our routine pretty well the same so we can just make it consistent and polish it. So there's times where it's like we only have 2 months away, so we can't keep chasing this complex piece that we really want to do. We'll put it on the board. We'll come back to it next year and see if maybe we can figure out a better way to fly it. But yeah, freestyle as a whole, it's just, you know, free fly as well. Free fly brings in another performer, but freestyle, it's probably your purest flying. You know, it's the camera, performer, and then it's just like all my attention is on camera, all attention on performer. So like you're not split amongst any other things. So it's just the best flying in general.
That's cool. It's I think I'm more artistic by nature, and in the formation skydiving discipline, you know, we're pretty fixed with the formations we have, just like you were saying. And I think the art falls into, you know, different aspects of that for me. You know, like when you're having to problem solve, you know, in real time, I think a lot of creativity has to come in with that. And I'm sure you guys, even though you guys are nailed down in a lot of your routines, I'm sure you have an element of that too. Just like we were talking about the you know, your lines coming together. Do you find that you experience that as well?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between good teams and great teams in freestyle is being able to see where things can go wrong and stop them before they do while you're on the jump. So like most good teams like know how to fly it right, whereas like the great teams know how to not fly it wrong. So we've screwed it up enough times where we know like this can happen in this move. This is what we're trying to prevent. This can happen in this move. This is what we're trying to prevent. Rather than just like, okay, we're trying to do it this way. It's like, these are the things that are bad and can be managed through these things. And that I think for us comes through reps, just being able to make the amount of jumps that we make. And I don't know if we could do it without that unless you just had just unlimited amount of time in the sport where you've seen generalized moves and you have a general thought process, which I'm sure is very similar in the formation world of these are the ways that this, you know, block can go wrong or this point can go wrong. And you organize it that way ahead of time. I think that would be the only way you could do it in freestyle on the creativity side is just knowing all the ways something could go wrong with 20 years of experience.
Yeah, I do that. I found that out at a certain point in my career, you know, when things, certain patterns arise and you realize that, okay, at a certain part of the skydive with maybe that certain person or that particular slot, this has got the high potential to go wrong here. And if I know that ahead of time, then I can anticipate that, and it won't negatively affect my thought process and thereby my performance. And
Exactly.
but it takes all those reps, doing it over and over and over to get that kind of intuitive feel where you can make those real-time split-second decisions, so that when you're trying to show this to the judges in the competition realm, that it seems a lot more seamless, and they might not pick up on it because you guys are flying so intuitively and are able to smooth those kind of, or iron those kind of little ripples out.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you never make you never make a perfect jump. Like, it just doesn't exist. We always say that whenever, especially new teams, because they get frustrated. It's like, you're never going to make a perfect jump. Like, I can't think of a single time where I was like, well, that was perfect. It's always been a couple things where I'm like, I could have been here. But like Jake was saying, we've found so many different ways to do it wrong. And, we have this general path or flow that we're going through it, but our ability to keep ourselves, like, once we start to see it, but put ourselves back on that path and make an adjustment, and both of us working together, it's like, oh, he's a little bit higher. I can go a little bit faster here for a second. I'll go a little bit slower, just to kind of help him in that sense, and be able to pick up on those pieces quick, so that we never really get far off that path. So, like, you don't see it. Someone that doesn't watch our jump a lot and be like, nope, I didn't see anything. And it's like, we've seen a lot because we've flown it, and a lot of times, but I think your ability to stay close to that path, so with everything just looks very, very consistent.
And that's an art in itself to be able to do that. And it's just another one of the many layers that, and the more I'm finding out, about your discipline, there's so many of those layers just stacked on top of each other. And then watching you guys in the finished product, it's just amazing. I wanted to bring it back to what you were talking about in Voss, as far as the management. The weather in Voss was definitely a challenge, but in spite of that, the true credit needs to be given to the drop zone management, as we were able to complete all of the competition rounds and all in every category and discipline. As competitors, we know that weather is a major distraction in dictating the tempo of competition events. And from a psychological standpoint, how do you manage your focus and energy levels in the face of weather delays? And how do you recover from issues which inevitably arise during competitions, such as having a bad or less than stellar competition jump?
So I think for us, or at least for me, the way that I think about competition, I know, you hear a lot of the concept of kind of like train like you fight, right? Or train like you're going to compete. I don't necessarily have that philosophy. I try to compete like I train. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to do, let's say, 1,000 training jumps a year. I'm going to make 7 competition jumps, maybe 14 for nationals and worlds, right? So I'm not going to be able to carry competition energy through 1,000 jumps, but I can carry my training energy to my competition jumps. So nothing changes. That's what I do every single day. So it's just what I'm going to do for another day. So weather holds, things like that happens on a training day very commonly. We kind of keep that same rhythm. We try not to treat it too terribly much different from that general mindset. And then you're going to have a bad jump on a training day, kind of the same thing. I remember our first nationals in Arizona. Our first 3 jumps were nothing to write home about. First jump was one of those things where middle of the jump, we're both looking at each other like, how did you get over there?
Yeah. Why are you there?
Yeah.
Why am I here?
Second jump, there was a compulsory sequence where when we landed, we're like, I don't know where I went wrong. I don't know if it was me. I don't know if it was you. I have no idea what happened. And then the third jump, when Jason got out, he caught his rig on the door, where, probably the biggest I've ever seen his eyes through his goggles. And I'm probably the same thing for me, right? So it's like first 3 jumps, we were like, what is happening? And I think at the beginning of each one of those jumps, we were trying to treat it like it was competition. We were trying to be too serious. Whereas like you've seen us on the airplane, we love to joke around. We have a good time. We stopped doing that on competition days. So once we started to understand, it's like, okay, our style is we're loose. Like, we don't need to be tight. We don't need to be super serious. We can relax and get out and fly well. And once we started to do that on round 4, everything kind of fell into place. And from there, I think that's kind of been our style. We're still disciplined in what we do. We're still going to walk the jump in our head. We're still going to do the things that we need to do to be successful, but we're not going to try to treat it like it's something different from what we do every single day.
That's it's funny that you say that, because that's exactly the way that I approach competition as well. And trying to remember the point that you were talking about as far as just staying loose, I guess. I've found with myself and a lot of other competitors that I remember back in 2010, we experimented with the mindset of, hey, let's go in here angry, like we're going to crush the competition. And then it just went pretty horribly for us there. And then we, just started to kind of go with a more of a training mindset. It's like, hey, we're focused, we're serious, but you can't get so uptight that, then things are just going to break apart. So I think it's cool that we share a similar mentality and thought process about it there as far as mindset's concerned. Is that the same for you?
Yeah, I think you can take yourself to an unfamiliar place of like, this isn't what I typically do. And like you said, you make 7, maybe 14, competition jumps each year. So yeah, if all of a sudden you're trying to be someone that you're normally not, it's like, you're probably not good at it.
Yeah, that's true.
So you just haven't practiced that version of yourself that much. So yeah, for sure, we're, how we interact is the same day, same on a competition day as a training day, so.
Especially in freestyle, with freestyle being unique in the fact that we know exactly what skydives we're going to make on competition day. And we're going to make those skydives over and over and over again as for our training days. Whereas like I know in formation, you guys will like kind of create your own draw. You'll fly those draws. And then whatever you get on competition, hopefully you had picked some things out that made sense so that you guys are going to fly really well competition day. For us, it's the same 3 jumps no matter what. So if we start to try to change what we're doing competition from what we did, training wise, when we were already doing the exact same thing, it just doesn't make sense. So I think that's a really good way to say it is like, don't be somebody that you're not.
Is monotony a factor in your training, having to, do that same jump over and over and over?
I think it can be when it's not going well. It's funny. You can generally see what time of year, I think, at least I feel like you can see what time of year that it is for us when you watch Jason and I on the airplane. When we're very quiet, just kind of sitting there together, it's probably early in the year, and we're probably trying to figure out what the heck we're doing. Later in the year, when we got it figured out, it's like, hey, man, we kind of had a little bit of mistake here. Like we got big here. Okay, cool. We can kind of fix this and this. Now we're a little bit more loose. It's a couple little small things here and there. We're joking around. We're having a good time, poking fun at whatever. But we feel like we're doing a whole lot less per jump. We're really, really fine tuning. So the small little changes I need to focus in on maybe 30 seconds before I get out. This is exactly what I'm going to make happen here. And then the rest of the time we can be loose, which allows us to not have monotony. We have a good time. Early in the year, yeah, that's a little bit different game. I think we even noticed it a little bit this year with free fly because we really had to put in a lot of time on the free fly team between Voss and Paraclete, between Worlds and Nationals. And those moments of putting a routine together in that short period of time, like it was not nearly as loose as it was a week prior when we were training for freestyle.
And there's a struggle there whenever you're trying to understand it, and we're trying to make sense of why whatever's going on in the jump. Maybe we're just not connected in some manner. And for sure, earlier, our first year of competing is probably longer phases of it. You're just like, you're sitting on, it's like, I don't know why this is going on. And you're trying to think about what you're doing and you're trying to think about, right. And it's like, it could be a timing thing. It could be all these different pieces. It's like, why is this just not working? But I think we've also gained an efficiency on how we communicate the issues whenever we're feeling something, and we're able to communicate better because skydiving, each discipline probably has somewhat of its own language whenever you're talking in the words so that we can understand what someone's feeling. And it's like, I'm struggling here. I feel like it's kind of slow. I feel like I don't have enough time through this piece. And so I think we're able to problem solve faster now. So maybe the jumps don't feel, the same or boring. So it's like, okay, cool. There's issues. We're fixing it. And it also doesn't get boring because we're always trying to get better. We're always just analyzing constantly. It's like, okay, how can we make this more consistent, better? It's like, why is this big here? Like it hasn't been, so there's always these moments of trying to figure things out. So I don't know that we haven't, or at least I haven't reached boring yet because my mind's always after every single jump. It's like, this could have been a little better,
Yeah.
This.
And I do feel like kind of talking a little bit back what we were talking about earlier with kind of like the friction stuff and then like some of the monotony stuff. I think one of the things that we have kind of figured out as a team philosophy is anything that's not going well, we try not to think as much like this is where I think you're affecting me and more is like, how am I affecting him? And that makes it very efficient to be able to figure out how to make it better because there's never a pointing fingers across the table as much as it's like, hey, man, I feel like I'm doing this to you. Is that how you feel? He's like, yes. Okay, cool. What can I do that's better? And then that allows us to be able to make changes quicker, which then allows us to grow quicker, which kind of kills the monotony.
And that can't be downplayed at all. You know, when you accept extreme ownership for your mistakes, I think it just makes everything better. And that's the kind of culture that we try to breed on the on XP8 or GK XP8 because it just helps things to flow a lot better. I've been on teams before where the dynamic is a lot of finger pointing and there's a lot more friction there, and I think that just inhibits progress altogether. But yeah, when you can almost to a fault accept your own mistakes, then it's just, things seem to go a whole lot better.
Yeah, I think one of the popular questions is, what can I do to help you here?
Yeah.
Like if we do start to sense maybe we are feeling something of like, I feel like it's this, but it still comes back to like, what can I do to make this better? Because maybe it looks like I'm about to do something and I'm not really presenting myself in a way that makes, maybe it's deceiving on his end on where the direction's about to go or something. So I think we definitely, probably ask that question, it's like, what can I do before you need to do this? We probably start with that one first.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. That's one of my favorite things these days, especially in competition and in training, is that kind of dynamic and figuring those kind of things out, man. I just love it. I'd like to talk about the differences and similarities in your visualization processes. I know some people like to, stick their earbuds in, when they're at competition and visualize like that. Other people don't. They find it a distraction. Do you guys have anything like that? I'm just curious, and I'm sure the listeners are curious as to both of your processes.
I think it's different at different stages through the year, like how I visualize through certain moves. I mean, for sure, you may see me on the airplane, like I'm using my hand. Like a lot of times I see the jump from just the outside as like a third person. So I'm trying to think on how, the rotation may go. So I use my hand a lot through certain pieces. I may not do that all the time, but for sure, if it's something that maybe I don't have a strong like mental side of exactly what's going to happen and trying to remember which way I need to turn, for this so that the jump flows. But as far as like visualizing, I would say maybe twice on the ride to altitude. I try not to just repeat because I think you can probably like overthink. So usually probably within like taking off, for the first little bit of the flight. And then usually I kind of disengage from everything, look outside, whatever, think about something else. And then, maybe one more time around 10,000 feet. And then after that, it's just like, okay, like here we go. And then having a different walkthrough. So maybe sometimes walking through in a lot of detail and like visualizing the whole jump, but then sometimes walking it through as kind of like your high points for sure with compulsories and those pieces. Trying to just like, okay, cool, I'm going to eagle, angle, all right, carve, and then straddle, kind of thinking at it from that standpoint and not getting too caught up in the details. Just so it's like, go out, fly, trust yourself, you know what to do.
And what about yours?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it is, I kind of do the same thing, especially early in the year involving like the hands and kind of thinking about a 3-dimensional from outside looking in kind of a visualization. But I think my visualization is a little bit easier than Jason's because I'm looking at the end product the whole time. Whereas very often one of the criteria for difficulty for free routines is a lot of blind moves. Obviously the camera can't be blind. So a lot of things are blind for Jason. So for him, he has to think a lot about the direction of certain rotations or, not moving in a piece or moving in a piece or very like specific to himself a little bit in a vacuum. Whereas when I visualize it, I think about, okay, as he moves this way, I need to move this way. And then once he can pick up on me and he can see me again, then he has that reference. But through those blind moves, it's a pretty big challenge to be able to have the confidence of trying to repeat the same thing over and over again. However, for me, it's a little bit easier because I'm thinking about what I should be seeing as I see it. But once I get to the later portion of the year, one of the things I do through my walkthrough in my head is I think about those preventative moves. So if we're thinking about like a compulsory eagle, it's like, okay, I need to head back here where I travel. Okay, I need to make sure I throw down at this time frame, or okay, I need to. So it's the very specific pieces where we've seen from reps that we've done, throughout the year. It's like, okay, this is a solution to make this fly well. I'm just going over those quick hit points. Those are the ones that I have in my head. The routine itself, I don't think much about. Like we just naturally kind of go there, especially if we're very current. It changed a little bit with freestyle and free fly because we would do a lot of reps on one or a lot of reps on the other, especially going to nationals because we did all free fly reps with no freestyle. So going back into freestyle, like the initial carved direction, I was like, I got to go right because in free fly I had to go left, Wow. It's easy to like fall into a rhythm, but if I'm current in that rhythm, I don't think about those lines as much as I think about the very specific pieces. Like this has to be here at this speed at this time. Okay, cool. Next, this needs to be thrown down at this moment. Okay, I need to be long here, short here. I need to stop moving, move a lot here. That's kind of those very specific pieces that I go through in my head.
And blind moves, that's another, element that I haven't thought about. Is that when, if you guys can explain exactly what a blind move is there?
For the most part, it's whenever I'm out facing in the sense of I'm facing away. I'm still trying to stay connected to Jake as much as possible, whether it's like looking over the shoulder and just catching glimpses of like, okay, he's here. And then I'm about to go through this, he should be here. He should be here. So yeah, it becomes a little challenging just because you're just not as connected as well. So fall rates can, there's just more potential, to get distance. And we're always, one of our main things that we always push is proximity. So it's just like closer. Like we want to feel the screen, we want it to feel like you're on the jump with us as well whenever you're watching the videos. So yeah.
And it's cool as a spectator, when we're watching in a competition, we go up to the screens and you can see when you guys are up, everybody crowds around and watches, and it's really exciting. And there's differences from the other teams, and I'd like to get into that a little bit later. But kind of coming back to that, and that just that visceral experience as a spectator that you guys do such a great job with. At this year's U.S. Nationals, you guys had a near perfect score of 9.7 on the 5th round of competition. How did that feel, and what made that round stand out to the judges?
Round 5 is a compulsory round. It's the second compulsory. It was, I don't know that we're 100% and, we're hard on ourselves. Probably maybe more so than anyone else, but yeah, I don't know that 9.7, we're always like, we'll watch the video and we usually kind of give like ourselves a rough score. I don't know, maybe it was more of a 9.4 or 9.3 or something. So,
yeah. We had a 10 on our angle sequence. Yeah, we had a 10. There's several judges, and each judge gives their score. And one of the scores on our angle sequence is a 10. And I think we are both kind of in the mindset of there's really no such thing as a 10.
Yeah. Because
it can be better than what we did. And next year it will be. So what does it become then? 10.1? Or is it still just a 10? So I think when that happened, we actually texted each other because that came out. It was the last jump we did. It came out later in the evening, the scores did. And I was just like, do you see round 5? And he's like, yeah. I was like,
That's funny because when I was reading out that question, I could see you guys kind of give each other the look there. I was like, oh, I wonder what's going on.
It was a good round.
Yeah,
it was a good round. We were not upset with the round at all, but we also we're hard on ourselves. Like you said, it's like we looked at the side fly, and at least from my perspective, the side fly, the side fly for me is very crucial in how I fly it, because if I move at all, it makes it look like Jason is all over the sky. So I actually had a little bit of movement on it. It kind of looks like he moved a little bit in relation to what we did at Voss, which I think was probably the best one I'd ever flown. And it almost looked like the screen paused. Like they're like, is it still going? Oh, it is going. It's like, that was perfect. That's what I see as a good side fly. And our side fly at Voss actually scored a little bit lower than it did at Worlds. So I'm looking at, at Nationals. So I'm looking at it going, well, I could have done that better, and our Verse Eagle, we had a little bit of, kind of like miscommunications going into later in the season, where we're trying to always kind of like fix things where I would kind of overcompensate to something and then he would overcompensate. And all of a sudden we had some poor reverse eagles flown in training. So now we're both going the other way. And it actually, I don't think was our best reverse eagle we've flown like by a long shot, but it scored fairly well. And I think the challenge sometimes too is the difference between watching our routines and then watching, the other world level competitors' routines. They're like very good. It's very close. Whereas Nationals, it wasn't the same. So the scores to make the scores make sense for the other competitors to earn the scores that I think they earned. Like the stack up, they want to probably give us higher scores than probably we see that we think we should have had, especially after coming off a world competition.
Okay, but that's where that subjectivity comes in that you were talking about before, as far as the judges go. And is there anything? Do you guys have any solutions in your head that or any ideas that might make that situation better? Or is it just because we're human and that's part of the game?
I mean, I definitely want to, mention that I think the judges have an extremely hard job.
100%.
I think that's a very challenging role, and the scores don't always reflect, it's not going to be the same. Like if you do a routine, the same exact routine in the same way one year or in one competition to another, it's going like you're going to get a different number. And I think part of it is going to be, the situation, the teams that are flying then, so the scores are going to vary in that sense.
Do you think the scale adjusts based on the
100%.
level of competition from year to year?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And so part of that is going on, so different judges value different things. Some people may be looking more aesthetics in one way that the other one may be looking at, they're focused more so on the setup for this piece. And so you're never going to get it, it's never going to be 100%, the same or this, just because people value different things. And
do you ever try to anticipate what the judges value based on if you have any idea what the panel is, or do you just go with, hey, we're going to train our routine and this is how it's going to be?
I think we for sure have got feedback from judges, and I think it's good to get feedback from the judges throughout the season, just to be like, hey, what do you notice? And we do that with judges. We do it with skydivers. We do it with people who's been skydiving for a long time, people who haven't been skydiving, newer jumpers, like, what do you see? What do you like? Like, what do you notice? And from the judges' standpoint, whenever we do get feedback, we'll get, simple things like, hey, I noticed this. And I'm like, man, I didn't even think about that. I had one judge first year, this one I always remember, but he's like, I just noticed your hands so much. And I was flying with just my hands and like my fingers spread like this. And so, man, the following week, whenever we were training, man, I was like full on knife hands,
He was out there hamburger helper.
It's just, and now it's like whenever I fly, I'm still for sure like occasionally, but like I'm usually like squeezing my hands, and it's become just normal now. So a lot of times you get feedback from even certain compulsories, and I remember it's like, you got to stop at this one point, and I wasn't doing something, and then once someone mentions it, it's like boom, like it sticks with you. And so I think it's good to get feedback from skydivers, judges, all that, because it's just going to make you better.
All right, that just adds another layer that I didn't consider either. It's almost like gymnastics or an event like that. I would take it where you have to be extremely aware of everything that's going on with your body, because you're
Not the visuals matter.
Yeah.
It's like whether with formation, it's like it doesn't matter. It's like, are the grips right? Versus this, it's like, is the move like, does it look good? It's like you kind of look like kind of all broken, and it's just not visually appealing. Like plays a factor. So it's like got to look good.
I think one of the places where Jason stands out at the world level and what he does is the fact that his flying is so aesthetically pleasing, all the way down to the fingers. Like he really takes every small thing into account to create this overall visual package. What I do is very specific to the lines and stuff, but if I'm exactly where I need to be at the exact right time every single time, there's nothing I can do to overcome somebody who doesn't fly aesthetic. So like it's a huge piece that, Jason has taken the responsibility on and has done it better than anybody else in the world. And that's why that we're having a lot of the success that we are is, both of us are taking responsibility on each side. And, for sure he's picked that one up and he does it incredibly well. We did judge indoor freestyle last year. And I think that was a little bit eye-opening for us to really get an idea as to how challenging it is to have an objective level of execution. You can specifically look. There is a lot of very specific deductions. That's like, this happened. This is the deduction. It's very simple. But beyond that, like actual execution itself, you're going to see variance just because people are going to say, okay, well, the way that he executed this move this way, I think it was really good this side, where somebody's going to be like, well, actually, I think the execution here was good, but this lacked in this particular, presentation point or whatever it is. So there's definitely a lot of variance as far as that goes, but it still always comes from kind of the same general rubric.
Okay. So is the difference in the judging and the different perspective that the judges have? Or
I think so.
Okay.
And as a whole, I don't think the judging itself, I don't think you need to be a fantastic flyer or really a very experienced flyer to be able to judge each particular round. I think the big piece where like actually understanding flying and stuff comes into play is when they assess the initial technical score of each routine, because then you have an idea as to exactly how difficult each move is. But outside of that, the actual scoring of each individual move, I think can be done pretty much by anybody because they're looking at a very specific set of standards. Did they meet it or did they not?
Gotcha. You guys also joined forces with relative newcomer James Rogers to form XP Ascend FF for the Free Fly event, in which you also won gold. How did you find James, and what's his story?
We judged indoor nationals. That's actually kind of a little bit of a funny story. We were judging indoor nationals, and then we were coming back from it, and we were both at the Denver airport. Yeah, we were at Denver airport, and we were flying back, and we had 2 separate flights. He was going to Phoenix or something like that, and I was coming back here. And we were just chatting before we left about kind of like overall schedule for next year. How are we going to attack it? It was November of last year, and we're like, okay, how do we start? And Jason just mentioned, he's like, I want to do free fly because it didn't have a single team, and we got to do something to keep the discipline in the States. And I was like, okay. He's like, I don't really care who I do it with, but there's going to be a team just so at least we have one. I was like, well, what about the James kid? He seems pretty good. He's like, it's not a bad thought. And at the time I was talking to James about getting him into freestyle, and he had a potential teammate that didn't work out. And I was like, well, if that doesn't work out, like maybe this is a good thought. And then from there, it just kind of organically started to turn into this concept of maybe we'll do this free fly thing. We scheduled a time to fly with him into land in January of last year. And after 1 or 2 jumps, we're like, yeah, this will work. We can make this happen for sure.
And he's like 18 years old and has been skydiving for like a year or less than a year, right?
Yep. He's a year and a half now. He's 19.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think probably what stuck out about James the most to us was his work ethic. And even though it's like, yeah, he's 19-year-old, but he doesn't act like it. I think you'd never know. I mean, he's professional, he's mature, and yeah, like again, his work ethic. And so to commit to a team and want to be on a team with someone, it's like, yeah, he's like, we can see that he would share the same vision that we have. It's like, okay, let's work really hard and do the absolute best that we can do. And yeah, the potential is for sure there. And yeah, I think that was probably one of the biggest driving forces. Like, yeah, we can get along with him and everything. Because at the end of the day, I can't think of many people. I couldn't sit here and, I mean, to do kind of a pickup team, but to do like a serious, legit team, like, yeah, there's very few people I could even think of.
We had no real aspirations to compete at the world level in free fly. We had slight aspirations to compete at a national level to keep it in the
keep it alive.
And keep it alive. Yeah. Mm. And after working with James, that was where it was kind of like, okay, he's gonna be able to work at the level that we want to work. And that was one of the main reasons why we didn't have aspirations in free fly. Was Jason and I both have high expectations for each other. We both know, whatever extra 2% is necessary to be able to win is going to happen, plus another 1%. Yeah. So to have somebody who had the flying ability, which honestly, I don't know is as important as some of those other intangibles like work ethic and stuff. You can build flying ability in a pretty short period of time. Yeah. But to have somebody who was wired to do that, that's where we were like, okay, I think we could probably do this, do freestyle and free fly at world level.
Yeah.
And the more that I've been around the sport, the more that I realize that those people are really hard to find. So,
so hard.
Whenever we look for someone, we definitely take those intangibles into consideration because, not only do we want you to be a good flyer, but if you have the potential to learn and you have the right work ethic and you have all of the right values and the right kind of character, you can gel, together with the team. All of those, play a big factor in, the whole equation into the team, being successful. So that's cool to find out that he has that. And I can see, I never really talked to him aside from, saying hi out of the drop zone, but I can tell there's that calm confidence that he has. And he does seem to be, a lot more mature than his years. I'd like to sit down with him and have him on the podcast as well. It'd be really interesting to get that fresh perspective on things for sure. What are the differences and the similarities between freestyle and free flying?
I'd say the biggest, adding that extra person in there. Now your attention is split, and now becomes the trifecta, to where it's like you're looking at the camera, but also the performer. And then that's also the difference of really good free fly teams and the teams that are, okay, is how well they interact with the camera. It's most teams, the newer teams, it's a two-way with outside video. And so if you're going to be good at free fly, it just adds a whole nother complexity because your attention is split between that. And then now levels become a little bit harder adjusting. So, and we're still learning. I mean, we've only been a year into the free fly. There's a lot of similarities, but at the same time, there's a lot of differences in how our approach. I think it's going to be a little bit different for this as we prepare for Worlds next year with free fly.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think there's a lot of innovation in free fly, for sure, where you've seen a lot of what he's talking about, where it's kind of a two-way with outside video. But I think the more we can kind of approach it in a little bit non-standard manner, I think the more we can start to innovate it. I always kind of draw the comparison of freestyle and free fly kind of with four-way and eight-way. Whereas like four-way, it's very fast, it's very in your face, it's tight, the references, there's less references, so, it can be flown a lot quicker. Where eight-way, from what I understand, not competed in either of them before, I understand it's a lot of like bigger eyes looking through the formation, things like that, where I think that's a lot of how free fly flies. Where the two-way, it's like we're always kind of looking at each other. It doesn't take much to know we're exactly in the right place at the right time, and then we can keep on moving. Whereas in the three-way side, the free fly side, being able to see I'm in the exact right the exact right place at the exact right time now because they're both there. Okay, now I can go. So it's just a little bit of delay for me. The visuals are a little bit bigger. I like to fly really, really tight in freestyle, and in free fly, if I'm flying really tight, but they get slightly large, now I have to get large. So things are, they happen really quickly and I have to react to it quickly. So that part's a lot of fun. But I think a lot of it is just because you're having to see a lot of things at one time rather than in the smaller ones. Like, okay, we're just referencing now and we can really, really move quickly.
And I've heard about you guys talk about innovation. You brought that up several times, and I think it's playing a key factor in why you guys are so successful. And I was just wondering if you can talk about any of the ideas that you have for innovation for free fly.
I think it's probably a big part is how we're going to interact with the camera.
Yeah.
And just referencing it the same way that we do in freestyle. I think our goal is to make free fly feel a touch more like freestyle in that sense and how it's flown. So maybe a little bit of a quicker pace. Jake and I prefer to a lot of our routines our first year, we felt like we had certain boxes that we had to, check to make sure that we, achieve what we were out to do. And then after that, I think that was the cool thing about this year is now that we checked that box, it kind of gave us a little bit of ground to experiment. And, that's where I think the innovation came out a little bit more so this year than what it did last year. Like we had a few ideas last year, but this year for sure more. So I'm hoping that with just what we've learned over the course of the couple of years, we can kind of pick up into free fly relatively quick. I think it's just our process of getting there to it is where it's gonna take a few jumps.
Yeah, we were very we actually kind of we had a little bit of a routine prior to going to Norway, and then when we did our first training jump back at XP after getting back from Norway, we actually changed the routine completely. Wow. So we were very, very short on time to create what we created for nationals. So it was a little bit more specific in how we did stuff. So a lot of it was like either Jason or I were in certain places. We kind of put James in between us because Jason and I have made thousands of jumps together, and James has flown with us for 400 jumps, So it's like Jason and I can really key off each other pretty well. And then if James in the middle, we should be pretty good. Whereas next year, I don't think that'll be the case because we'll have time to fly together more. So it'll be a lot of leader switching and doing certain things to where visuals become far more dynamic than what you would normally see in a free fly type of routine.
Oh, that's cool. I can't wait to see the end product next year. What's your strategy as far as splitting the time between training for freestyle and training for free fly? And are you worried at all that having to focus on both? I know that you have already and you're already successful, but does that play a factor in maybe, are you worried about it downgrading your performance at all in one event or the other?
We've definitely talked about it and the importance on how we strategize The nice thing about freestyle is the compulsories are not changing this year. So you have 3 routines for freestyle and free fly as well. So you have a free routine, you have compulsory 1 and compulsory 2. So compulsory 1 and 2 for freestyle are not changing, and we're going to keep the same routine. So we might tweak a few little things, but for the most part, those are pretty well set. So we'll come up with a whole new free routine. So that part is nice, but it's definitely not something that we're just going to set to the side with freestyle, because freestyle was the original goal, and that's still very much a priority on what we're going to do. We know it's a big undertaking for both, and we talked about, it's like, this is what it's going to take. And yeah, we've already sit down and kind of laid out what our expectations for the year and what it's going to take as far as jumps and time. It's just going to take a little bit more.
As far as the free fly, do you take into consideration what other teams are doing on the world level, or?
Yep,
absolutely. The French team that has won the World Championship and the World Cup past 2 years is very good.
Yep.
They're very, very good. They're doing some really innovative things as well. It was funny. We actually had some things planned for our free fly routine, and we showed up to Voss, and they flew like 2 of them. And we were like, well, shoot. Now we need to come up with new things, you know?
We're not doing that now.
Yeah. So, yeah, for sure. They're, I would say that's the case for really both, though. Like freestyle and free fly both have some very, very talented teams floating around this big blue ball of ours. So, yeah, I mean, we always take that into account. We're always trying to do just more than everybody, because at least for us, it's like you're going to have a tough time beating us, because you're going to have a tough time outworking us. That's kind of our kind of mentality. And I think that's the same with James. And we learned a lot this year in training for 2 teams, even with the priority being on freestyle completely, and less so because free fly was really just more of a national event for us. But we learned a lot of, where we can't leave certain disciplines behind. It's like whatever we do with one, we kind of got to do with the other, or we start to become uncurrent. And for us, I think currency is really, really big as we fly these routines, because we'll notice if we step away for a week, 2 weeks, we'll forget that one small little detail that we did add. And all of a sudden this move isn't flying well anymore. And we're like, what are we doing different than we were? And a lot of that just comes from the currency. So I think for us this year, our big goal is just to maintain currency on both teams, at least to the best of our abilities.
Yep.
Yeah, it seems like reps are really, repetition. When I was talking to you, I think it was about a year ago, you guys had made how many jumps that year? It was over 1,000, I think.
Yeah, we started the team the very beginning of September 21, and Worlds was in October of 22. It's like 13 months, and we did a little over 1,300 skydives together.
Man.
Yeah, from that time frame. Mm-hmm. I think our first, in the month and a half before our first nationals, we had a month and a half. We did a little over 300 jumps. So yeah, it was like, oh, cool. We woke up today. Let's go jump.
Yeah, pretty much every day. And we had a little bit of that this year too. We're adding a free fly team, and Worlds was coming a little bit quicker this year, with it being in August rather than it being October or November or something like that. So we added a couple things. We didn't really make too many freestyle jumps in the month of June really at all, because it was focused around free fly. And all of a sudden we're looking at Worlds in August, and we're like, all right, we got to go. And
we got to finish our free routine.
Yeah. we kind of had to do the same thing. We were really blessed with the weather we had here in Rayford in the month of July. And we pretty much did the same training goals that we had that month and a half we had prior to our first nationals, is in essence how we approached a month and a half prior to the World Cup this year.
Yep.
And I definitely want to give a shout out to Paraclete XP too, absolutely, because
1,000%.
How that drop zone has evolved over the last several years, and the fleet of aircraft they have, and just the way that they support all the competitors across all the disciplines. It's just becoming this huge hub of skydiving on the East Coast. But they really take care of us as competitors, and make sure that our needs are well met. And just because of the jumps that you guys have made, I assume that's the same experience for you.
1,000%.
Yeah, I start to say I appreciate the vision that they have. Even talking with Tim, like that vision is still there, and like it's passed on, down to John and like all of them. So it's like the vision is still there to be known as like this is the place, and it's it's just like continuing to carry on, and
I mean, it's fairly obvious. You look at the world level next year for the world championship, and if you look at formation and artistic, which generally are grouped together, there's 6-ish teams. You got male 4-way, female 4-way, 8-way, VFS, freestyle, free fly. 4 of those teams are coming from XP.
Yeah,
it's like you're not going to compete with that.
Yeah, for sure. I was wondering if you guys could talk about the new intermediate freestyle category at the U.S. Nationals and why it's important for your event and the discipline as a whole.
Yeah, it's freestyle free fly is a very challenging discipline in the sense of whenever you first come into it, you got to be able to do all the things, and then even now with some of the compulsories, like you got to be able to fly on your side. And thank goodness for the tunnel. It definitely is a great tool to help get you there. But at the same time, it's the newer skydivers and that connection to us once you get licensed. It's like there's quite a bit of a gap there. And really some of the few, formation is really the only discipline that you can kind of fall into right now. And we had talked this last year's nationals about, how do we bring in more teams? What's the approach? And they had brought in some of the old rules for intermediate, which were still kind of lofty for some of the compulsories. Yes. And it's like, how do we take this so that someone that's just flying on their belly, fresh off student, can actually go up and do a lot of the compulsories and a lot of the moves. So we took and, we changed the compulsories, we adjusted a lot of stuff, and just in hopes to kind of like show that starting point, show how to start flying together. A lot of the formation stuff, even from the video standpoint, it's a lot of the videographers for the formation, whether it's FS, VFS, anything, the cameras, they're moving some, the more advanced teams, to show certain blocks and all those pieces. But, once we start like working together with the performer, it's a little bit different level of flying for the camera. So on both sides of it, I think we're trying to create an opportunity for the newer flyers to get in and start to see what it's actually about. A lot of the compulsories, it's making the sky a 3-dimensional place. It's showing how to move in horizontal orbits, vertical orbits, angles, moving in general, tracking. So I think it's helped building a lot of skills early as well. So I think that was our goal with intermediate with the newer teams.
And you guys both coach quite a bit. What ability levels do you coach? And you just came off a camp this past weekend down at Skydive Carolina, right?
Yes.
What do those camps entail? What ability levels do you coach? If you could just tell us more about that. And go ahead.
Yeah. So the camps for us, we try to make as inclusive as possible. So our minimum requirement for majority of our angle camps, to be more specific, is 100 skydives and an AAD. From there, we'll start to introduce basic kind of general fundamentals of how to move across the sky. But along with that, we end up with people who are highly advanced, and we try to create groups that allow people to be able to grow when they come to the camps, no matter what their skill level is, whether they're trying to do things very dynamically in the sky or they're just trying to figure out how to move across the sky for the first time ever. So, it's one of those things that it's been very cool to see from the beginning till now with a lot of the repeat flyers that continue to come back, like where they're at now in relation to when they first showed up. But it's been very interesting to see how much growth is happening as a whole, not just with our participants, but also with us and the events themselves. And then outside of the angle stuff specifically, we've also been doing a little bit more on the freestyle side and the team side. And it's been really cool to kind of work with some of those teams that are on the advanced side, some of those teams that are on the intermediate side, and start to just introduce these general concepts of how to be dynamic in skydives.
Yep. Just body flight in general, I would say we for sure enjoy, most skill levels. And I would say whether it doesn't necessarily have to be a team, getting a chance to work with individuals that just want to commit to more, like they want to actually commit to getting better, and they understand that it's going to take some consistency in a lot of those. So for sure, I think it varies with the skill levels with the teams. Whether it's a newer jumper, also in the tunnel, it's working with people that's, fresh off student status. There's a lot of skill levels, and that's the nice thing about Paraclete, right? We got the drop zone, and then 10 minutes away we have the tunnel. So it's rain or shine, doesn't matter. We're for sure trying to grow the sport, and we're also trying to educate skydivers a lot. A lot of the stuff that we're teaching, isn't even just body flap, but just a better understanding of your environment whenever you are at the drop zone or you are traveling. Just a lot of the things that you can be more aware of, the winds and, jump run, exit order, a lot of, canopy stuff. We're just trying to create a better environment, because there's a lot of the sport's grown so fast, and it still is, with new technology and our awareness of what's actually going on. And we're in a unique situation that we make a lot of jumps throughout the year. And I think we've seen a lot of stuff, and we've both learned a lot as we've seen stuff, and a lot of the same reps, and we started to notice trends and different stuff. So I think we both are, eager to share our knowledge as well in all the aspects. That's one of the cool things that I really enjoy about skydiving, is that even the competitors at the highest levels, they're still, very approachable, and the environment and the culture is such that you can progress the sport faster if people are interested, because they can get in on coaching with world champions, and just the level raises everyone up so much faster. And it's that's cool. So it's I think it's going to be a great thing for your discipline, as far as generating more interest, and you get people in there and get people excited about it, and see what the possibilities are. And I kind of wish those opportunities were there for me when I was a younger jumper too. But that's why I think Paraclete and just this area in general is such a cool place. How did you guys feel when you won gold for the first time at the World Championships in 2022? Man, that was such a cool experience. I think whenever we showed up, and we were focused, we were confident in flying. We trained a week and a half prior to the comp, just jumping every day, just turning loads, and I think our confidence was just building. We didn't have a lot of confidence going once we first arrived in Arizona. We felt like we were kind of falling off a little bit, but then we started making jumps in our confidence, and by the time that we got to the competition, we were peaking for sure. And every round, went exactly the way that we wanted to. And that last round, I remember a lot of times whenever we fly in the free routine, I have a checklist pretty much in my head. And as we're flying, I'm like, all right, cool, that's a check. Okay, got to go to this next point. All right, check. And going through that, and then I remember the last jump specifically as we're flying, and it was like that checklist was going down, and I could just feel the energy building. And it was going so well that we actually finished a couple seconds earlier than what we had been training. But we got docked just a little bit for that, but it didn't really matter at that point. We had a good lead. But it was. I remember once we passed at the very end of the routine, like, man, all the energy just let loose, and under canopy, like all the energy, and then in the landing area, it was. It was a cool experience. For sure, something I probably can't really put into words, but
Yeah, it was really cool. Obviously Jason had been on a pretty long journey at that point to become a world champion. For me, it was my first world championship I ever competed in. But I told him when we started, I was like, we're going to go win it on the home soil. Like, if we're going to do this, we're going to do the work, and we're going to go win it. Like, we're not going to bring home another silver medal. So, I had a lot invested into it, just psychologically. And we were flying pretty well. We, coming out of nationals that year, nationals were at Skydive Chicago, and we were getting out of an Otter. And that year, for whatever reason, we had lost the Otter at XP right after nationals. So we were getting out of the Caravan. And it's when we really started to realize that the exits for us change, or the skydives changed a lot based on how the aircraft is flying. And the whole routine was flying really weird out of the Caravan, and we were losing confidence quickly. So we had a conversation one night, and we're like, do we just go to Arizona early? And we canceled a bunch of stuff, rebooked a bunch of stuff, and we went early. And that really helped us a lot. But once we were kind of hitting that competition time frame, we were flying really well, and we had a pretty good lead, and we kind of knew going up on round 7, this is all we got to do is just fly this. Nothing catastrophic, and we're good. And we said there's really no such thing as perfect jump, and that one was about as close as we could make it, so much so that we were really efficient and finished really early. But it was funny, at least for me, because I didn't realize how early we were, but either way, as I finished the jump, I always kind of just watch the sky. So whenever the last frame is, that's the last thing the judges see. I always want it to just be a blank blue sky that's not moving. So they can't tell if it's really super early or right on time or, So I'm celebrating, staring at the sky, trying to keep my hands out of the frame without moving my head. So it was a very bizarre way to like track off and celebrate, but it was 100% like it was just this release of energy of like, okay, a full year of just jumping every day as hard as we can, like come to fruition. And that's not an experience a lot of people get to really have in their life of what does a lot of work look like at the end of the journey. And we've talked a lot about it. Standing on the podium for me at that moment wasn't as great as I think waking up every day and going to work was. And the end of that jump was pretty amazing. But once you stood on the podium, that podium moment was more along the lines of like Jason and I looking at each other going like, okay, Voss is like right in front of us, And it was less to do for us, I think, of the destination and more of the journey itself. And we've talked a lot about that in the past, but I do really think it holds true for us. We really enjoy what it looks like every day, going through those early moments of depression, trying to figure out the free routine, and then going through those fun moments of making those small things, and then showing up to the performance and performing at a high level, trying to innovate things, and then rinse and repeat the next year.
Yeah, it's you said it right. The prize is in the process, and it is all about the journey for sure. That's what I came to experience after that first medal that you get. You're kind of up there on the podium, and after it's all over, you're like, oh wow, that was over. That's it. If you're just looking at that one aspect of the experience, but it's really so much more than that, and that's just the validation of what you've done that whole year. And it's interesting that you say that not a lot of people get to experience that because unless you're in some competition arena or something where you're testing your skills that you train for constantly, you really don't get that. I've had conversations with my dad about that, who was with Special Forces as well, and he was like, we train. And during that time, he was with, it was more of a peacetime army at that point, and he really never felt like he got to truly put his skills to the test. So I do feel very fortunate as far as that goes. There's so much more I want to talk about, but I want to be, I want to be conscious of your time. I know you have to go soon, but I wanted to touch on just one more thing. I'm a firm believer in having pre-competition rituals. I find that it helps to minimize or control as many variables as possible and helps keep me focused leading up to a jump. What are your pre-jump rituals, and why do you think they're important?
I would say ours is probably train a lot.
Yeah.
Jump a lot before we get there. I don't know that I necessarily drink coffee.
Yeah. No, it's funny for me, my pre-jump ritual, probably 90% of the time, whether it be competition, whether it be coaching, whether it be training, I play a lot of chess on the airplane.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I play a lot of chess on the airplane.
Like on your phone?
On my phone, yeah. And I'm fortunate being the video flyer because I don't like having a weird cell phone shaped image on my chest is not something that looks bad like it would for the performer that's, in front of the camera. So I always have my phone on me. And it's one of those things kind of like the fight like you train type of thing rather than train like you fight is like, when I'm on the airplane, when we're training, I play a lot of chess. So when competition rolls around, I still play a lot of chess. I do definitely make sure that I take the time to think about the specific things that I have to pre-jump for competition, but I try not to change too much. So I keep myself loose that way. That's what I would do. And there was one point, I think, in the World Championships in Eloy, I think it was, we were going up for round 5, and I played my first game, and I won at like 2,500 feet. And then I played my second game and it was like 6,000 feet and I won. I looked at Jason and I was like, it's going to be a good day.
Nice.
Yeah. I was sitting here trying to think. I was like, do I do anything? Probably the night before, it's just usually because, energy, thoughts, everything kind of going on. I usually like go on a walk, have my headphones on, and I end up finding, usually leading up a couple of weeks, I usually have a song that I've just beat to death on repeat, and that's kind of starts to become like a little bit of like a tune with the routine, just even before getting out of the airplane, just like starting to kind of just like loose up, get a little bit of a flow. But yeah, I find myself, I did it in Eloy, I did it in Norway, but just kind of like going on like just a walk by myself just at night, the night prior, the nights prior to the rounds, and just kind of walk in and just maybe visualizing the jump a little bit, walking the jump, but yeah, just finding somewhat of that flow even prior to the day of comp. So
what kind of music do you each listen to? Because that's one of the things when I was a younger jumper, wondering, I was like, oh man, what are the world champions listening to? I want to listen to that. So what do you listen to?
It's got to flow.
Yeah.
Like it's, I don't know. I listen to a lot of different stuff like the Crooked Colors, Elderbrook. I was trying to think. Yeah. I kind of go on different kicks with different, a lot of times it's bands I don't even know who they are, but Spotify somehow is like, hey, you might like this. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, one thing I know for sure about music with Jason is it's got to have a good beat to it. You'll always see him kind of doing one of these head bobs. Whether he's listening to music or not, like he's thinking about it, right? Yeah. And I'm a lot of the same way. I think Jason and I's taste in music is very similar, although I'm a little bit more eclectic in other ways, where I'll listen to some like classic rock stuff. And prior to joining the Army, I actually worked as a cowboy for a few years, so I actually have a lot of like cowboy music and country music and stuff that'll play through playlists. And I mean, you name it, I've kind of listened to a little bit of everything. But when it comes to like skydiving sides, like type of stuff, yeah, something with flow. I think Elderbrook's a really good one, or Bob Moses, or something along those lines that has kind of that like that nice beat in the back with a good kind of melody to it. I think that's all it really takes.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm so attracted to house music, and
sure.
DJ'd for so many years, because it's got that beat and it's got that flow and rhythm to it that is kind of the supporting structure for the pace of skydiving and what we do. What do you think sets you apart from your closest competitors?
If I'm being honest, I think one of the biggest things that sets us apart is the aesthetics of which Jason flies with. I think that's a really big difference. I think there's a lot of really good flyers out there, and I think there's a lot of teams that are starting to fly well together. I think early on, what set us apart is how well we fly together. Most people don't fly the routines the way that we do. We do have a couple other kind of trade secrets that we share with people that are getting coaching from us that I think helps as well. But more than anything, like there's the second place team for the past 2 years is a really good team. But when it's all said and done, I think one of the big differences is how cleanly Jason flies in relation to other people across the planet.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I was just going to say, I think the shared vision and the shared, like between Jake and I, just the, like what we want to do, like we're like the expectation and like what the actual goal is it's mutual. So I think that's the important piece. I've been on several different teams, and sometimes, this level of success is acceptable. And then sometimes, maybe it's not, but I think we both share like what we want to achieve. And so it's like, okay. And then we're both willing to do the work to do it. So it's, like I said, you can teach skills, and, to say that I was a great performer in 2021 and Jake was a great camera guy. Like we definitely weren't, but it's like, cool. We're going to be, and it's like we're going to put in the work. So I think that's probably kind of help set us apart. Not to say that teams aren't, but like we found that piece that kind of matches.
Yeah. I think that's a great mentality to have. And you're talking about trade secrets for the people that you coach. Where can people find you if they want to get coaching from you guys?
I think one of the easiest ones is xpsn.com is a really good resource to get a hold of us, but also to get a lot of information. We have sections in there just for freestyle, free fly, artistic, all of our angle stuff. It's a really good place to find us. Outside of that, most people find us on Instagram, Facebook. We're fairly easy to reach, and we try to respond as promptly as possible, although Jason's been falling off recently since he bought another house.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Anyone that's tried to reach me, and it took me a week.
Yeah, including me.
Yeah.
Well, these are some things that I want to come back and talk about. We're going to have to do a round 2 of this podcast with you guys, because I want to talk about your real estate business, and I want to talk about you being a cowboy. I didn't know about that, so that's super cool. But I want to be respectful of your time. So I'll ask this last question. What's the best piece of advice you'd like to share with other jumpers who dream of becoming national and world level champions in the future?
Keep doing the work. Be consistent. It's doesn't always happen quick, but if you keep showing up, keep working.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing to do is to start. And then I think the second hardest thing to do is keep going. So I think most people have aspirations, and then nothing ever comes from it. They're like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then, 4 or 5 months later, I'm like, so how's that coming? Like, we didn't do it. And it's like, well, then it's, you're never going to get to where you're trying to be if you don't just do it. And then once you do start, it's frustrating. You just need to know it's going to be frustrating. And then as long as we continue to push through it, we'll be able to continue to grow. But at first, we see it all the time, especially in the sport of freestyle and free fly. You get some really, really good flyers that start trying to do this and don't realize how hard it actually is. And that's very discouraging. So it's one of those things where we were very fortunate when we started, where Jason actually had some experience in it. So even though we were in brand new roles, doing brand new things, we still had a general idea of what it should look like. But having an idea of what it should look like and how to do it and stuff like that is not always available to everybody. It's one of the reasons why we started this portion of the website where you can go in and click on the competition link on it. And then we have a bunch of rules, videos, as much as we can do to help. But doing that, even with really good flyers and knowing how it flies and those things, like that takes time and it's frustrating at first. So we just need to keep going until it starts to become easier. That takes a lot of skydives.
Yeah, for sure. There's going to be plenty of frustrations. And then I would say to the teams and people who are on teams, lay out the expectations, you know, and then get specific with them, because if you're like, yeah, I want to do well, or it's like, I want to, I want to win whatever it is, intermediate, but it's like, okay, what is that actually going to take? It's like, okay, and then, and we set high goals, and then we set, our what we want to, and then what we have to. We kind of set two different ones. So we're shooting for this one goal, like jump numbers or amount of tunnel, those kind of things, amount of training days. And then we have ones like doesn't matter what's going on, we have to get these. So I think laying out the expectations is super important, because as soon as expectations aren't met between, it can for sure drive a wedge. So I think that's a nice thing, is like, okay, we want to be at the top. Okay, what's it going to take? It's going to take this. Okay, I'm good with this, So I think laying those out just for people on teams is just lay out the expectations. Have those conversations and have them early, because if you have them laid out and it's just like, okay, right here it is, and occasionally look back on them.
Yeah, and I think along with expectations, as far as like jump numbers and stuff goes, there's also expectations on priorities. One of the things we notice, the difference between like kind of good teams and great teams, or okay teams and good teams, is how it's prioritized. I think it's very easy to be like, okay, cool, we're going to train a lot. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I kind of have this thing. Oh, I have this thing, Whereas like when training season rolls around for Jason and I, it's like we drop everything. Yeah. Very, very, very rare is there something where it's like, hey, I really want to do this. It's like, okay, cool, we can give up this week to do this, but we got to pick it up in this week, and we work together to make that happen. But more than anything, the priority is we're going to train.
And we always have those conversations whenever it's like, it's almost like permission, like the mountain flying, it's like, hey, it's like, I don't know. It's like, this is probably what's going to take. It's like, well, okay, but we need to do this. And, so like we have those conversations regularly whenever we have things going on. And, the more that things are going well, like we have a lot of stuff coming up, but we have to say no to a lot of things as well. It's like we kind of have a window to do some things, but then it's like, okay, cool, once training season's here, it's like, sorry. We'll see you in November.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you have to have an uncommon level of dedication in order to be a part of a team and to have it be successful for sure. And with you guys, I feel like, I'm sitting in the middle of greatness right now, and that's the way I feel when I see you guys when we're out, out of the drop zone. And but what I also really appreciate about you is that taking with that is that you have a level of humility that's really cool, and that I really enjoy, and I think that just adds to the aura of you guys even more. So I really appreciate you coming out to do this, and there's definitely going to be a part 2, because there's a lot of things that I want to get in the weeds in. So, but thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us out. This has been great.
Yeah,
thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of a Champion's Journey podcast. I look forward to putting out episodes more regularly in the very near future, as well as introducing additional content for paid subscribers that you won't want to miss out on. Look for exciting details on how to become a subscriber in the next episode.